Welcome back to ReadingBear. Today, we will take a look at some new ProRevenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, Thief tries to get me to pay finder's fee, but I help him get a felony instead. I had just moved to a new city for work and had been working here for about 3 months, so I am still pretty new to the area. My apartment complex, I would say, is in a nicer part of the city and is pretty well kept, so I didn't really expect anyone to go and try breaking into cars. I was set to travel and had a pretty early drive, so I had packed everything for my week-long trip the night before so that I could get up and just get on the road. The next morning I walk out to my car, and I see clothes off to the side of my car, and thinking it was weird, I started to look around the car. Turns out, my car had been broken into and was cleaned out. Out of the trunk, they took my laptop bag, which had both my personal computer and a government computer, 2 gym's bags, one that had my work clothes and the other had my workout clothes and personal hygiene stuff, and a backpack that had my Nintendo Switch and office supplies in it. They also took $50 out of the console where I keep change and random bills for parking. This obviously throws a wrench into my work travel, so I call my supervisor, explain the situation, and come back into work. It's my fault I left all that stuff in my car, so I had to go to our security, IT office and explain what had happened and see what the next steps were to get a new work computer. During this meeting with the physical security manager, which was 3 hours after I found my car broken into, I get a call from a local number, and it turns out this guy had found my laptops on the side of the road when he was coming home from visiting his mum. My bag had a "contact me if found." The conversation goes as follows: "Guy, hey man, I found your laptops on the side of the road. I figured you would want them back. They look pretty important. Government laptops are plastered with stickers with official jargon and returning instructions." Me, for sure. I am currently at work now, but I can come to meet you or whatever works. Guy, yeah, man. I'm just coming back from visiting my mum, so I am trying to get home, so I can relax. Me, cool, I can make it work. Can you text me your address and everything, so I can just come to you? Guy, I'll send it to you here in a second. It's also my birthday, so if I could get some money for like a finder's fee or whatever, I think that would be cool. Me, yeah, man, whatever you need. See you in a bit. As soon as I get off the phone, I call the local police in that area and explain that this guy is trying to extort money from me to get stolen goods back. They instruct me to meet him a few blocks away from the residence, and they will send a plainclothes cop and officers to act on my behalf, so I am not in direct contact with the guy just in case, since the situation sounds sketchy. I go and meet him where they go to the residence. The guy is hesitant to see the cop cars and takes a few minutes to return the bag with the laptops in it. They bring the bag to me to identify the laptops, and everything's still there. I accept the bag and got my laptops and bag back. Easy enough. On the drive back to work, no more than 15 minutes later, this guy still had my number and starts going off, bad unreadable spelling and all is seething through text messages on how I could get the police involved. He was trying to be a good Samaritan, and he should have thrown my crap in the grabbig. So, I did the normal thing and blocked the number. Now, I'm still missing everything else, including the Nintendo Switch, which was in a case with 7 games, important. I was originally going to take the loss on it and take it as a stupidity tax since it was almost impossible to get back. However, something didn't sit right with me with this guy, and thinking if he did have it, he was going to try to sell it fast and cheap. I went onto Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist searching for a Switch for cheap around the same location as his house. Bingo. The ad read $200 Nintendo Switch with 7 games and case lightly used, no charger or dock. Must be gone today. The location was enabled and was within 2 miles of his address, the phone number was the same, and the dock and charger were in my apartment. So, I had a buddy of mine who lived in the next city over contact him asking if he could hold onto it until tomorrow since he wouldn't be in town until the next day, and he would pay him $300 instead. The dude agrees and also gets him to read off all 7 games that were there. This was to buy us more time, so I can go coordinate with the police. The next morning, I get everything together to go make a case to police to assist me with this police report, the Craigslist ad, the serial number from Nintendo, the screenshots of the text messages between him and my buddy. I make my case and the police agree to do the same thing as the day before and meet me somewhere else to go over what the plan was. I meet him and go over his address and what all I had missing. These are different officers than the day before, and they recognize the address and the name. We found out this guy is known for this stuff and is currently on probation. So, we come up with a plan where my buddy will call us on his work phone so we can hear the conversation and call him on his regular phone to see what's going on. The police use a plane car to go to this meetup spot, acting like my buddy, to scoop the guy up and get him to cough up the rest of the stolen goods. They were able to recover all my items including all my clothes and bags. He ends up going to jail and earns a new felony on his record for receiving stolen property. I think I would have lost the rest of it if I didn't do the digging on Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist. The next one is titled, Dad Knew Exactly What He Was Doing. This is actually what happened between my father and the contractor who built his house, my childhood home. In 2000, my parents and their 2 young children, ages 7 and 5, that's me, were looking to move into a house big enough for a family of 4 and that they could stay in for a very long time. They found a newly constructed street in a quiet neighborhood in a town known for being family-friendly. It was perfect. There were only 4 available lots, so my mother chose the one she liked best. Now the houses on these lots were still under construction, so they were mostly just framing at this point. So my parents decided to contact the contractor, let's call him Alfred, and see if they could have any input into the design, as they had already set up a mortgage agreement on the property. Alfred agreed but didn't let them do too much, which wasn't all that bad. My parents were pretty busy trying to sell their old house anyway. A few months go by, and the house is finally ready to be moved into. My parents are thrilled, they finally have their family home. We move in and everything's great, for about 36 hours. On literal day 2, the furnace in the basement breaks and spews smoke throughout the whole house, setting off the smoke detectors. The police and fire department shows up, investigate, and tell us that we can return in 72 hours. So we stay in a nearby hotel for 3 days. Everything is great again until we start noticing a bunch of small details that Alfred seemed to have overlooked. My dad hires a home inspector to look at the house. The inspector finds numerous faults that could cost thousands to fix. My dad is upset. So my dad, being the calm butthole he is, and I love him for it, decides to get some help in paying for these repairs to his 7-month-old house. You see, Alfred had been the contractor for 4 houses on the street, of which only one, ours, had been bought. So my dad went to the bank and expressed interest in the other lots. He asked that a $1,000 lien be placed on each one. This was all legal. Alfred found out and was rightfully angry. He couldn't sell these lots because of the liens. He asked my dad to remove them. My dad agreed and said he would if Alfred paid for the repairs. Alfred refused to pay, so my dad refused to lift the liens. Alfred then sues my parents. My parents counter-sue. The court rules in favor of my parents. My dad had to lift his liens. But Alfred, he had to pay my parents $50,000. Instead of paying $3K for repairs. And a home inspector looked at the other 3 lots and made him pay for any repairs on them. The next one is titled, He Couldn't Work Any Longer for a Discriminatory, Rude Manager. I worked at a fairly well-known restaurant in a small, northern New England city as an assistant manager. The owners were very successful restaurateurs with several successful, non-chain establishments and spent maybe a day or 2 a month in our location. The rest of the time there was a general manager in charge. Her name was Jan. Jan was about as typer as they come. She was a middle-aged woman, but beautiful and petite, and she always looked put together and primped. Jan had started with the owners a decade earlier in their first restaurant as a server and had worked her way up to general manager over the years. At first, I just thought she had extremely high standards, which I respected. I have high standards as well and take pride in my work. I had been impressed by how the kitchens were spotless, the staff was immaculate, like run a white gloved hand under the back of the oven and it comes back white kind of clean, and the food was always top quality. I had frequently been a customer and was thrilled that I got the job there. I had been in the business for a decade and that restaurant was the place in our area. I was so excited. Unfortunately, I quickly learned why everything is so shining and perfect. Jan was a tyrant. She was the kind of boss who soured the mood of the entire staff like a storm cloud hovering over us that never went away. Nothing was ever good enough and the standards changed from day to day. On a good day, she would shut herself up in the office and then leave early. Good days were very rare and could turn into bad days at the drop of a dime. On bad days you couldn't be perfect enough and she would come up with new rules and regulations just to punish people. If a host called out sick, they were literal children, she would berate them on the phone and make them cry. If a cook made a mistake on a plate, she would humiliate them in front of the staff, accusing them of doing it on purpose and then give us all the silent treatment for hours after. Seriously. If someone's cash out was off, even by a few cents, she would accuse them of theft and force me to cut down their hours. As a fellow manager, I was mostly spared her awful behavior, though I had to hear about her treatment from my staff almost every day. All of this was just run-of-the-mill bad boss stuff until it came time for our yearly staff evaluation meetings. This is where Raoul enters the story. Raoul was a hard-working dishwasher who had moved to our state from Puerto Rico a few years earlier and spoke English with some difficulty. Whenever I had to go over anything official with him, we would have a coworker translate between us to be sure we were both communicating clearly. Jan refused this courtesy to Raoul. This made his evaluation pretty difficult. Raoul managed to communicate to us that due to recent cuts in his hours, he would be forced to get a second job to pay the bills. Something about this absolutely set Jan off. She told him she would fire him if he dared. I could see plainly on the intake paperwork in front of me that Raoul had been hired with the understanding that it would be a full-time position, so I pointed that out. Jan was furious, but agreed through gritted teeth that if Raoul agreed not to get a second job, she would bump his hours up to at least 35 hours a week. It was stated as clear as day and I documented it in my daily manager logbook. Work went on as usual after that and I didn't think much of this meeting again for a few months. Another time a while later, while filing out information for tax returns, Jan called me into the office. I could tell she had pulled the tiny room apart looking for something. All the information about our Puerto Rican employees is gone, she told me with a mixture of panic and suspicion. I looked at the files in question and they all seemed to be in order, so I was confused and told her I couldn't help. A few minutes later I walked back in the office to find her arguing with Rosa, our most talented chef and a Puerto Rican native. Rosa was perfectly fluent in English. No Rusa. Jan was speaking to Rosa as though she were hard of hearing or mentally slow. "Where is your green card? What are you talking about?" Rosa was confused. "Are you an illegal or something? Is that why one of you broke in here? To hide the proof?" Jan wasn't yelling, but her eyes were cold and flashing with rage. "What?" Rosa was starting to get angry now. It suddenly clicked for me, so I interrupted. "Jan, you do realize that Puerto Rico is a United States territory, right?" "Of course, I know that." Jan snapped back. "Okay, so you know that Rosa has a social security number like any other American native." "Oh. Right. Never mind Rosa, you can go back to work." Jan did not apologize for accusing Rosa of theft. I was so done with this place after that. Jan did all kinds of little things like that and she never apologized. I had already gotten a job offer for a place closer to my house when the final straw came. I was the closing manager one day and got in just before the dinner rush to see Raoul storming out the back door. He didn't speak much English, but his ducking idiot was very clear. Jan had lied about raising his hours to 35 per week, so Raoul had gotten the second job he talked about. When Jan found out, she fired him, but not before saying something about how all you illegals are the same. She was really fixated on these American citizens being illegal aliens for some reason. By this point, I hated this woman too. She once told me my clothing made me look poor in front of the whole staff. I was wearing what she made me wear. Meanwhile, she wore open-toed shoes behind the line, which is against the health codes, and once her fake nail fell off into the coleslaw and she wouldn't let anyone toss it out after she retrieved it. This is just the tip of the iceberg, but I have a life to live. Since I knew I would be leaving soon anyway, I told Raoul he should go after our boss for wrongful termination since I had documented proof, with Jan's signature, that he had been promised more hours and that Jan had broken the agreement, not Raoul. The last time I saw Jan was on my way out of Raoul's lawyer's office after giving a deposition about several labor laws she had violated. At least the ones that I knew about. Apparently there were many others she had broken in front of other employees. She couldn't even look me in the eye. The best part? At my deposition, I learned that Jan was actually the one who was illegally in the country. Her green card had recently expired. She was Canadian. She ended up being sent back to Canada as a result of this case, and no one has heard from her since. Raoul was granted 6 months of unemployment pay, plus the restaurant had to pay his legal fees. They closed that location not long after. Maybe they should hire their managers more carefully next time? Jan, if you're reading this, I hope you got your crap together. I also hope you learn to wear closed-toe shoes behind the line. You wouldn't want to end up a huge, gigantic duck-up due to your own negligence, now would you? The next one is titled, Her Grumpy Neighbor Got Caught in a Lie and Kicked Out. 1 year ago, I was renting a house next to the most unpleasant neighbor I have ever experienced. The only thing I liked about her was her cat, this freakishly adorable tabby who could grab even the most hardened criminal's heart by the balls. Every time I came home from work he would sidle up next to me for some TLC, which he never got from my neighbor. As far as I could tell, she just used the poor thing to keep away mice and play, i.e., be terrorized by, her toddler grandkids on the weekends. The poor fur baby looked severely underfed and always appreciated the meals I'd leave out for him on our back porch. Now, I have an indoor fur baby of my own, a tailless ball of energy, aptly named Goblin, and one day he managed to escape outside. Luckily I found him within a few hours, but by the next morning, what jumps on my lap? Not Goblin, alas, but a flea. And if my social butterfly cat had fleas, I was positive the next door fur baby had fleas too. Now, I already had a bit of history with this neighbor. In addition to being a twat rocket to her cat, she'd harass my older parents who were helping me move in. Why? Because our U-Haul rental was blocking a sidewalk to nowhere in front of my house for all of 10 minutes. My parents are extremely pleasant people. My mum frequently gets thanked on customer service hotlines for being the rare kind soul in an ocean of impatient Karens. And this lady was berating them needlessly for ruining the community, ranting even longer than they'd been parked until they eventually moved to an inconvenient and wholly unnecessary distance. Regardless of her twat rocket personality, I figured I'd warn her anyway in the best interests of her fur baby. When I knew she was at home the next day, I knocked on her front door. When she answered, "No, hello, just a scowl," I started to explain that my escaped indoor cat has fleas, and so there was a good possibility that her outdoor cat also had fleas. Immediately she berates me for letting my cat get fleas and snaps that she keeps her house very clean, unlike me, so there is no way her cat has fleas. I just loudly sighed at her and went back home as she continued to yell, "You've never even been to my house, lady. And that's not how fleas work." All week I noticed her cat scratching himself raw and felt so bad for the little guy. I wanted to give him flea medication and a flea bath, but with my neighbor now watching me like a hawk and screeching like a banshee if I even pet him anymore, I had to leave him alone. But, I realized, there was something I could do. You see, we shared the same landlord, who was very concerned about household pests and instructed us to call him at the first sight of a bed bug, tick, etc. I also knew that my neighbor was keeping her cat a secret from the landlord to avoid paying the pet rent, as I'd overheard her bragging about this to a friend outside one day. So what do? I call up the landlord to explain the flea situation, and I make sure to add that my neighbor's cat has also been scratching like crazy. There's a pause. "Did you say she has a cat?" "Yes," I assure him, "she definitely has an indoor-outdoor cat." Turns out that my neighbor had harassed our landlord into replacing most of her carpet due to her alleged cat allergy. I don't know why the landlord caved into this, but it wasn't cheap. And now our landlord learned that not only had Madwoman lied about an allergy to score a free renovation, but she hadn't paid pet rent in more than a year. Well, an exterminator gets called, and our landlord himself shows up to oversee the whole thing. We had both received a flyer taped to our front doors giving notice that he would be coming to our houses on the date, but I may or may not have removed my neighbors so she wouldn't be able to just hide evidence of her cat for a few hours. So our landlord arrives, and I listen gleefully with my window open as my neighbor tries to prevent him and the exterminator from entering. Eventually, she allows them to come inside, where there is obvious evidence of a pet living there. I don't know exactly what transpired between her and the landlord. There must be other sh*t stains on her record, being such a nutcase, but a few months later I had a new next-door neighbor. And guess who Madwoman purposely abandoned during the move? Her poor fur baby, who became a much-loved and flea-free member of our house. The next one is titled, "Can't Deal with My Dog's Poop on My Own Property?" Here's a little something for you. Here's some backstory. I have a 4-year-old Cocker Spaniel named Charlie and he likes to poop. I let him out in my front garden every morning for his toilet routine, same in the evening. We don't have a boundary fence on where my garden and my neighbor's starts beside a row of bushes. Saying this, Charlie hasn't ever pooped past these bushes. Now every week, I collect up said poop before it gets into a disturbing amount. I've been doing this for the past 4 years to keep my front garden looking good and not smelly. One day, I come home from work to find that my neighbors weren't happy that there was dog poop in my front garden. I instantly went to collect up what was there. There wasn't much and it was nowhere near the boundary of where our gardens met. Fast forward a week, my neighbor again complains about the dog poop being in my garden, however this time threatens to hurt my dog if he continued to poop in my garden. This time I wasn't so nice about it and stated that it's my garden and my dog can do as he pleases. Now I know dog poop can be annoying. But when it's not in your garden and there's no smell due to decent airflow and open front garden, is it really justifiable to threatening a man's dog over some poop? Anyway, after months of this going with petty things and shade being thrown at me every day about having a dog, I decided to declare war on my neighbors. Now I knew these people pretty well. They'd just moved in and we let them use our Wi-Fi for a couple of months until they got theirs sorted. I picked up a few things about them and one of them was how OCD they were. They cut their back garden every week and painted the entire bottom layer of the house to match their fence. This was all the fuel I needed to exact my revenge. My first step was to start off small. I knew they liked things to match, so I painted my fence gate bright pink instead of matching it with my fence. This was my first small victory. They hated it so much they begged me to correct the color. So I did. I figured if peace was an option it was worthwhile. Then began the hate again. I had to come up with something so evil and yet genius that couldn't be traced back to me. This is when I planted over 5,000 dandelion seeds in their front and back garden. I figured I was in this for the long game. I did this under the cover of night and made sure to plant them in places not easily mowed. Fast forward 3 months and their garden was covered in weeds. They grew through all the slabbing and were patched all over the garden. It took them over 3 days to clear the weeds and around 100 pounds of herbicide. The last one is titled, "Don't Want to Believe the Sign and Take the Stairs." You leave me no choice. So I'm an elevator technician. When they break, I'm the one who fixes them. When parts wear out, I replace them. You get it. The other day I was on a job replacing a worn-out emergency light. Back in the day, it was a habit to use the battery of the emergency light to power the elevator's siren system. Modern emergency lights have different voltages being LED, so I can't use the old way of connecting everything. So, I have to wire everything up from scratch, including a new battery and siren. No big deal, but it takes a little longer to complete the task. Note that this is a 3-stop elevator. Ground floor, first, and second. I start by hanging up all my out of order signs and start working on the ground floor. 5 minutes in, just disassembled the old piece, the story begins. In comes the entitled woman, mid-40s, can walk perfectly fine, carrying one barely filled grocery bag. Entitled woman, excuse me, is the elevator broken again? Me, not exactly ma'am, I'm changing this, showing her the new emergency light because the old one wasn't working anymore. This will probably take about an hour to complete. At this point her daughter walks in. Ooh, how am I supposed to get my groceries upstairs? Me, getting annoyed, I look at her bag, and give her the, "Are you ducking kidding me? Look daughter, mum, seriously, take the stairs, it's 2 floors. Clearly annoyed. Ooh, no. I pay for this elevator, and I need it now. Sigh, I'm going up. And takes the stairs. Ooh, how long is this going to take? Me, like I said, ma'am, about an hour. The woman then sits her butt down on a bench in the hallway waiting for me to finish. Really? Oh well, I do my thing in the cabin, not hurrying at all, mount the new E-light to the ceiling, and pack my things to go 1 floor up to start the wiring on the top of the cabin. Ooh, you done yet? Me, no, ma'am, I still have to wire things up on top of the elevator. Ooh, no, I can see you're done, you're packing your things. Me, yes, I have to take my bag 1 floor up so I can start on the wiring. Ooh, can't I use it now? Me, no ma'am, you can't, there's exposed wiring up there, if you use it now you can cause a short and you will get stuck. It's really not safe. Ooh, fine. And she sits back down on the bench, seriously upset. I take my bag and make my way upstairs. As soon as I stand in front of the first floor door, I hear the door on the ground floor close, and sure enough, Ooh went into the elevator and tried to take it upstairs. Hell no, I wasn't having that. I take my emergency key, and as soon as the elevator started moving, I open the lock, cutting the safety chain, and the elevator comes to a sudden stop. This scared the crap out of her and she screams. I open the door and in my most fake surprised voice, I yell, "Oh no, what have you done?" while calmly pressing the emergency stop on top of the elevator. Yep, this thing isn't going anywhere soon. This is exactly why I said the elevator is unsafe to use now. I'll do my best to get it working again as soon as possible, but you made a mess up here, so I don't know how long it's going to take. There was no mess, but I couldn't resist teaching her a little lesson. Ooh, asterisk swears, yells and makes a scene, asterisk me, I'll be right back. I have to go to the engine room to see if I can get it working again. I close the door and make my way up. On the second floor, the daughter came out of the apartment because of the yelling of her mother. I quickly explained what happened. Raising her voice, "Oh no. Please get her out of there." But then she comes closer and whispers to me, "Don't hurry, make her suffer. That's my kind of girl." Music to my ears. I smile, give her a thumbs up, and make my way up to the engine room. I call my supervisor to explain the situation, in case she files a complaint. In the engine room I start playing around with the fuses, putting her in the dark, because I haven't connected the E-light yet. I play with her for about half an hour before I turn off the emergency stop I activated. The elevator synchronizes to the lowest floor, and I wait for the doors to open. Please, don't ever do that again. Ooh, white as a sheet, shaking, "No, I won't." And she takes the stairs and goes inside. I never heard from her again. I calmly finish my job, and leave the building with a smile on my face. Mission accomplished. FYI, I made sure there never was any risk. It was intentional that the elevator was able to move because I needed it to. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to access the car top because of the distance between the floors. I tested all safeties I was going to need before I started the work. I disconnected the old light, which was convenient with a plug when I tested said car top safeties, so there never were exposed live wires. When I blocked the door with my bag, I never left the site. On every floor, the "out of order" tag was placed over the floor call buttons, and the reason why I initially started working on the ground floor is so people who enter the building can clearly see me working when the elevator was still active. The moment when I started working on the car top, and people couldn't see me when entering the building, I did make use of the stop button, that I already tested, to prevent the elevator from reacting to calls. Every action I took was well thought out, potential risks were considered, and actions were taken to eliminate them. If I really needed that elevator to stay where it was, I would make sure it would. Thanks for listening.